I didn't walk into my own birthday dinner expecting to question my marriage. It was supposed to be one of those polished adult milestones. 38 years old. Private room at a high-end steakhouse in downtown Chicago. Brianna insisted on handling everything herself. She said it was important to her that I felt celebrated. She even booked a professional photographer because, according to her, moments deserve to be documented. At the time, I thought that sounded thoughtful. Now I realize it sounds staged. When we arrived, the room was already buzzing. Soft jazz in the background. Dim lighting. Brianna's co-workers clustered near the bar. I recognized a few faces from past company events. People who always seemed to look through me rather than at me. And then there was Ryan. Ryan Cole. Senior VP. Brianna's boss. The man whose name had started appearing in our house more often than mine. He stood near the center of the room like he owned it. Navy suit. Relaxed smile. One hand wrapped around a whiskey glass. When he saw Brianna, his expression shifted in a way I hadn't seen before. It wasn't professional. It wasn't polite. It was int asterisk mate. She let go of my hand before I even realized she'd squeezed it. Ryan, she said, her voice lifting in a way it hadn't when she'd wished me happy birthday that morning. They met halfway across the room. Too quickly, too comfortably, and then it happened. His hand settled at her waist. Not high, not friendly, not hovering. Firm, familiar. She didn't flinch. That's the detail that keeps replaying in my head. She didn't move his hand. They leaned in toward each other, and he said something into her ear. Something that made her laugh softly, the kind of laugh she used to reserve for me when we were still newly married. Her head tilted toward him instead of away. Their bodies angled inward, creating that invisible bubble couples create when they forget the world exists. I stood a few feet away holding the gift bag someone had just handed me, feeling like I'd interrupted something already in progress. I told myself I was being dramatic. Corporate people are touchy. Loud room, tight space. It meant nothing, but it didn't stop. Throughout the evening, Brianna gravitated toward him like gravity was a choice she kept making. During the toast, she stood beside him instead of beside me. When the photographer gathered us for group sh*ts, she somehow ended up next to Ryan in nearly every frame. In one of the photos, I caught something that made my stomach tighten. Ryan wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at her. And she was smiling at him like she'd forgotten anyone else was in the room. At one point, I stepped outside the private room to breathe. I'm not a jealous man. I've never been territorial. I supported her career from the beginning, late nights, networking events, weekend conferences. I believed in her ambition. But watching your wife blend into another man's orbit in front of you does something to your chest. Compresses it. Makes you question whether you're seeing clearly or losing your mind. When I came back inside, they were standing near the bar again. His hand was there, that same spot on her waist, thumb resting just slightly lower than professional would allow. That was the moment I decided to say something. Not loudly, not dramatically, just privately. I waited until she stepped away to grab another drink. I followed her toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. Hey, I said quietly, can we talk for a second? She smiled, but it was tight, controlled. What's up? I chose my words carefully. I didn't accuse. I didn't imply. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not trying to make a scene, I said. But the way you and Ryan are standing, the touching, it's making me uncomfortable. She blinked at me, not guilty, not surprised, annoyed. Are you serious right now? She asked under her breath. I'm just telling you how it feels, I said. It's my birthday. I don't love watching my wife stand that close to another man. Her expression changed instantly. The warmth drained out. What replaced it wasn't shame. It was strategy. Greg, she said, voice measured. He's my boss. I know that. So what exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm saying the physical closeness feels inappropriate. She let out a soft laugh, the kind people use when they want to shrink you in public without raising their voice. You're reading way too much into this, she said. This is corporate culture. People are comfortable. It's not high school. I'm not talking about culture. I'm talking about boundaries. Her jaw tightened. This is what I mean, she said. You do this. You make everything about your insecurity. That word hit harder than it should have. Insecurity. Yes, you get weird whenever my work overlaps with your ego. It's exhausting. My ego. It was my birthday dinner. I'm not threatened by your job, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm asking for basic respect. And I'm telling you, she replied, smile already returning to her face as someone walked past us, that you're creating a problem where there isn't one. Then she leaned in slightly. If you keep acting like this, you're going to embarrass both of us. There it was. Not reassurance. Not understanding. A warning. She adjusted her dress, smoothed her hair, and walked back into the room with that polished executive composure she'd perfected over the years. When the photographer called us over again, she positioned herself beside Ryan without hesitation. His hand returned to her waist like it had never left. I stood on her other side. In the photos, I'm smiling, but I remember exactly what I felt in that moment. Not jealousy, not rage, displacement, like I had already been edited out of my own life and just hadn't been told yet. And the worst part? She had managed to make me feel like I was the one ruining the evening, like I was too sensitive, too insecure, too small to understand the room. By the time we got home that night, she was glowing, energized, talking about how successful the event had been, how important it was for her visibility within the company. She never once asked how I felt, and I didn't bring it up again. But something had shifted. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like a guest in my own story. After that birthday dinner, something changed in me. Not overnight. Not dramatically. I didn't storm around the house accusing her. I didn't demand her phone. I didn't confront Ryan. On the surface, I stayed the same husband I'd always been. Steady, supportive, reasonable. But internally, it felt like someone had removed a filter from my vision. Once you see something you can't unsee, every memory starts rearranging itself. The first thing that hit me was how often Ryan's name had entered our house over the past few months. At first, it was harmless. Ryan loved my presentation. Ryan says I'm up for something bigger. Ryan thinks I should start traveling more. I had been proud. Now I started noticing the tone. There was a softness when she said his name, a familiarity that didn't match the formal way she described everyone else. Then there were the late meetings. Brianna had always worked hard, but suddenly her team dinners stretched past 10. Her client strategy sessions happened on Fridays. She'd come home energized, not exhausted. For someone who claimed she was grinding 12-hour days, she had an unusual glow. One night I remember distinctly. It was a Tuesday. She walked in at almost 11, heels in hand, hair slightly undone. Instead of collapsing on the couch like she used to after long days, she went straight to the bathroom, humming under her breath. When she came to bed, she smelled different. Not perfume, cologne. I asked about it casually. New fragrance, I said. She laughed lightly, probably from hugging people at the office. You know how crowded elevators are. The exact same phrasing she'd used before. Rehearsed. I let it go. At least I told myself I did. Then came the passwords. We'd always known each other's phone codes. Not because we policed each other, just because it never mattered. We shared everything. At least I thought we did. One evening I reached for her phone to check the time while she was in the shower. The passcode screen blinked at me. I frowned. When she came out, I mentioned it gently. Oh, she said, drying her hair. IT made us update security settings for work stuff. Always a convenient villain. After that, her phone lived face down. Always within reach. If it buzzed, she glanced at it before responding. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes her expression tightened quickly when she saw me watching. And then she started getting irritated. That might have been the loudest alarm. If I asked how her day went, she'd sigh like I'd asked for an interrogation transcript. Can we not do a full debrief every night? She said once. I'm exhausted. I stopped asking. But the distance grew anyway. Our dinners became quieter. She scrolled more. I filled the silence with safe topics, bills, vacation ideas, shows we used to watch together. She stopped inviting me to corporate events. At first it was subtle. Oh, this one's small. Just internal. Spouses aren't really coming. The one time she did invite me, I understood why she'd stopped. She introduced me as my husband Greg. Just that. No mention of my work. No context. No pride. It felt like she was ticking a box rather than presenting a partner. I watched how Ryan greeted her that night. The same familiar hand at her lower back. The same quiet, lean-in conversations. But this time I also noticed something else. Other people noticed too. A glance here. A smirk there. Someone quickly looking away when I caught their eye. It wasn't a secret. It was tolerated. That realization hit harder than anything else. Then there were the expenses. I handle most of our financial tracking. Not because she can't. Just because I'm wired that way. Patterns matter to me. I started seeing small inconsistencies. Late-night rides from downtown to boutique neighborhoods we never visited together. Dinners at upscale restaurants we'd never gone to as a couple. Charges labeled client entertainment that didn't align with her official travel calendar. When I asked about one of them lightly, neutrally, she snapped, "Do you audit everything I do now?" That word audit made me pause, because it implied guilt before I'd accused her of anything. The moment that shifted suspicion into something colder happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had taken the day off unexpectedly. On impulse, I decided to surprise her with lunch. Nothing grand, just her favorite Mediterranean place. I showed up at her office around 1. The receptionist smiled politely. "I'm here to see Brianna," I said. She checked her screen. "She's in a meeting with the team," she replied. "Okay," I said. "I'll wait." The receptionist hesitated. Then she lowered her voice slightly. "She actually left about 30 minutes ago." "With the team?" I asked. Her pause was brief, but it was there. "With Ryan." I thanked her and walked back to my car with the food still warm in my hands. That was the first time I felt something inside me go quiet. Not explosive anger. Not heartbreak. Just clarity. Later that evening, Brianna came home glowing again. "How was your day?" she asked casually. I studied her face. The confidence. The composure. The practiced normalcy. "Fine," I said. I didn't mention the office visit. I didn't mention the receptionist. I didn't mention the way her alibi had already collapsed. Instead, I watched. I replayed months of small dismissals, small irritations, small deflections. Each one by itself could be nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. And the worst part? When I thought back to my birthday dinner, the way she'd turned my discomfort into insecurity, I realized something terrifying. She hadn't panicked because she was caught. She'd panicked because I'd stepped out of the role she'd assigned me. The supportive husband. The background character. The man who funds the lifestyle and asks no inconvenient questions. For the first time, I started asking myself a question I'd avoided for months. What if the affair wasn't hidden because it was impossible to detect? What if it wasn't hidden because she didn't believe I'd ever look closely enough to see it? And that realization hurt more than any proof ever could. Suspicion is a strange thing. At first, it feels like paranoia, like you're betraying your own spouse just by thinking it. You look for ways to disprove it, to talk yourself down, to be the reasonable one. But once enough pieces line up, suspicion turns into something colder. It becomes patience. I didn't confront Brianna after the office visit. I didn't accuse her. I didn't go through her phone in a panic. Instead, I waited. I told myself I needed certainty. Not a hunch. Not a pattern. Not a receptionist's hesitation. Certainty. The opportunity came disguised as one of her business trips. She told me on a Monday morning that she'd need to stay overnight downtown because of an early strategy meeting the next day. "It just makes more sense to grab a hotel near the office," she said while packing a small overnight bag. "Ryan's doing the same. The whole team might. Ryan's doing the same." The way she said it felt deliberate, casual. meant to normalize it before I even reacted. I nodded. Which hotel? I asked lightly. She hesitated just a fraction too long. Not sure yet. Probably the Westbridge or somewhere close. Not sure yet. But she'd already packed. That night, the house felt hollow. I moved through it like someone occupying a rental, not a home. Around 10, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our shared credit account. A charge. Not from the Westbridge. From a boutique hotel downtown, the kind that advertises privacy more than luxury. I stared at the screen longer than I'd like to admit. My chest didn't tighten. It didn't explode. It went still. I opened the transaction details. Corporate card. Ryan's corporate card. The booking confirmation had automatically synced because of an old shared email configuration Brianna had never thought to disconnect. Room 1812. 2 guests. That was the moment the last piece clicked into place. I didn't drive downtown. I didn't call her. I didn't create a scene. Instead, I did something far more dangerous. I started digging. I accessed the archived email folder she assumed no one would ever check. The one connected to a secondary device she'd forgotten we still shared years ago. And there it was. Not graphic. Not romantic. Transactional. Logistics. Room confirmations forwarded from Ryan. Same arrangement as last time. Discretion appreciated. Use corporate billing. Last time. The phrase echoed in my head. This wasn't a new mistake. This was routine. As I kept reading, another detail surfaced. One that changed the stakes entirely. An internal memo. Not meant for her eyes. Forwarded by Ryan. Subject line. HR resolution. I opened it. It referenced prior complaints. 2 to be exact. Both involving inappropriate relationships with subordinates. Both quietly settled through legal channels. No admission of wrongdoing. Just misalignment of expectations and mutual agreements. Ryan had done this before, and Brianna knew. She knew the risk. She knew the history, which meant something else was true. This wasn't coercion. It wasn't manipulation. It was ambition. The most cutting realization came as I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the laptop screen. That birthday dinner. The hand on her waist. The photographs. It hadn't been hidden. It had been displayed. She hadn't been careless. She'd been confident. Confident that I wouldn't challenge it. Confident that her career trajectory shielded her from consequence. Confident that I would absorb the humiliation quietly, like I always had, because I had always chosen calm over conflict. She mistook that for weakness. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. A text from her. Long day. Going to sleep. Love you. Love you. I looked at the words for a long time. There was no anger left in me. Just clarity. I opened the hotel's public event calendar and cross-referenced corporate bookings. I made a quiet call the next morning under the pretense of confirming a catering invoice tied to Ryan's company. The receptionist confirmed what I already knew. Yes, the room was billed under his corporate account. Yes, it was a recurring reservation type. Recurring. Meaning this wasn't spontaneous. It was scheduled, planned, structured. I sat in my office later that day and allowed myself one final replay of the past year. Every late meeting. Every irritation when I asked simple questions. Every time she positioned me as insecure instead of acknowledging my discomfort. She hadn't just betrayed me physically. She'd been rewriting the narrative in real time, turning my intuition into pathology, turning her secrecy into my flaw. And the cruelest detail of all? She hadn't even tried that hard to hide it, because she believed I wouldn't act, that I was too stable, too predictable, too invested in preserving peace, that I would swallow the disrespect as long as the image of our life remained intact. I closed the laptop slowly, not slammed, not violently, just closed. In that quiet moment, I understood something with terrifying precision. The affair didn't begin in a hotel room. It began the moment she allowed another man to humiliate her husband in public and expected him to accept it. And it ended not when I found proof, but when I stopped doubting what I already knew. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I started planning. Most people expect betrayal to be followed by chaos. Shouting, accusations, plates breaking against walls, public confrontations. That's what movies teach you. But real power doesn't look like that. Real power is quiet. The night I confirmed everything, Brianna came home the next afternoon glowing the same way she always did after her overnights. She dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her heels, and kissed my cheek like she hadn't spent the night in a hotel suite funded by her boss. "How was your day?" she asked, already walking toward the kitchen. I studied her. Her posture was relaxed, controlled. There wasn't even a flicker of guilt in her eyes. If anything, she seemed lighter. It hit me then. She believed she was winning. I smiled. "Productive," I said simply. And that was the moment I stopped being reactive. I didn't need a confession. I didn't need to catch her in the act. The truth was already documented, time-stamped, archived. Now it was about leverage. For years, I had been the quiet foundation of our life. When she left her first job to take a risk on a new company, I floated us financially. When she needed capital to invest in a partner initiative tied to senior leadership, including Ryan, I wired the money from a private account under my name. She called it a strategic opportunity. What she didn't know was that I structured it carefully. Equity participation, convertible terms, liquidity triggers. She saw it as support. Ryan saw it as quiet backing. Neither of them saw it as control. Over the next week, I moved with precision. First, I secured my personal assets, separate accounts, updated beneficiaries, legal consultations framed not as divorce inquiries, but as asset protection reviews. I didn't mention infidelity. I mentioned exposure. Second, I reviewed the investment structure tied to Ryan's division. The capital I had provided years earlier had helped stabilize a short-term liquidity gap during a transitional quarter. It wasn't public knowledge. It wasn't flashy. It was invisible support. Without it, certain reporting timelines would have looked very different. I scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor under the guise of portfolio rebalancing. "Is there a scenario," I asked calmly, "where we accelerate withdrawal on the convertible structure tied to that private equity position?" He reviewed the terms. "There's a trigger clause," he said. "You'd create short-term stress for them." Stress, not collapse. But stress was enough. Meanwhile, at home, Brianna continued her performance. She cooked dinner twice that week, laughed more, touched my arm casually when she passed me in the hallway. It almost felt like she sensed something had shifted, but misinterpreted it as reconciliation. One evening she said, "You've been different lately." "How so?" I asked. "Calmer." I nodded slowly. "I've just been thinking about priorities." She smiled like she believed that meant us. Didn't. Behind the scenes, I requested formal review documentation regarding my investments' performance benchmarks. That automatically flagged executive oversight, including Ryan. Nothing accusatory, just procedural. Simultaneously, through legal channels, a quiet inquiry was initiated regarding conflict of interest policies tied to executive relationships with subordinates. Not a complaint. Concern. Language matters. Concerns trigger audits without triggering lawsuits. By the end of that week, I had repositioned myself entirely. If Brianna thought I was the background character in her corporate ascent, she was about to understand something critical. Background elements hold up the entire frame. The following Monday, she mentioned something unusual at breakfast. "Ryan's stressed," she said absently. "Some financial restructuring conversation is happening at the board level." I buttered my toast slowly. "Is that so?" "Yeah," she replied. "Probably nothing. Just numbers." Numbers. I almost smiled. That afternoon, I executed the withdrawal notice. Perfectly legal. Perfectly timed. Within contractual rights. No accusations. No emotional outburst. Just consequence. By Wednesday, liquidity strain began surfacing internally within Ryan's division. Temporary freezes, budget tightening, executive reviews. And once scrutiny starts, everything rises to the surface. Old HR settlements, expense patterns, corporate card usage, travel anomalies. All things that remain buried until someone looks closely. At dinner that night, Brianna seemed distracted. "Have you ever thought about how fast things can change?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," I replied. She studied me for a moment. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't realize had already been completed. I wasn't doing this out of rage. I wasn't doing it to humiliate her. I was doing it because I finally understood something fundamental. For years, I had mistaken stability for safety. I thought providing meant protecting the marriage. I thought silence meant maturity. But silence, in the wrong hands, becomes permission. And Brianna had taken my restraint as permission to rewrite the rules. What she didn't understand, what neither of them understood, was that I had never been powerless. I had simply chosen not to use my leverage. Until now, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Truth doesn't need volume when it has structure behind it. And structure was already shifting beneath her feet. The foundation she thought was unshakable? It was built, in part, on me. And I had just started removing my support. Quietly, deliberately, without raising my voice once. The shift didn't happen overnight. That's the thing about real consequences, they don't explode. They erode. By the end of the second week after I executed the withdrawal, Brianna stopped coming home glowing. She came home tense. The first sign was silence. Not the irritated silence she used when she was annoyed with me. This was distracted silence. Calculating silence. The kind where someone is replaying conversations in their head, trying to anticipate outcomes. At dinner one night, she pushed her food around her plate more than she ate it. "Something wrong?" I asked casually. She hesitated. "There's just some restructuring talk happening," she said. "It's temporary, probably." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of water. "Restructuring can mean a lot of things." "Yeah," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "Liquidity tightening. Board review. It's political." Political. I almost admired how gently the truth brushed past her. By that Friday, the internal review had officially **N. I didn't need inside access to know. Executive audits leave visible ripples. Calendar blocks. Sudden compliance trainings. Expense account freezes. Ryan's name started appearing in industry rumor threads. Nothing concrete, just whispers about governance questions. Brianna's phone buzzed constantly now. But the energy had changed. No more smiling at the screen. Now it was sharp exhales. Jaw clenching. Fingers typing fast and stopping abruptly. One evening she said something that confirmed everything. "Do you ever feel like people turn on you the second you're vulnerable?" she asked out of nowhere. I leaned back in my chair. Sometimes vulnerability just reveals what was already unstable. She looked at me for a long moment. "You're being cryptic lately." "I'm being observant." She didn't respond. By Monday, the first public domino fell. An internal memo leaked. Executive compliance review regarding potential conflicts of interest at senior levels. No names mentioned. But anyone inside the company knew exactly where the spotlight was aimed. Ryan. I watched Brianna read it at the kitchen island that morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled. "This is insane," she muttered. "They're overreacting." "To what?" I asked evenly. She froze. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just optics." Optics. I had learned that word well over the years. It means the problem isn't the behavior, it's the exposure. 2 days later, another development. Old HR settlements resurfaced during the review. Legal had to disclose prior misconduct resolutions tied to Ryan. Patterns matter in corporate governance, especially when capital instability coincides with executive conduct issues. Investors don't like patterns. The board likes them even less. I received a formal notice acknowledging my withdrawal acceleration. It triggered a scheduled review meeting. Perfectly procedural. Perfectly timed. That evening, Brianna didn't cook. Didn't scroll. Didn't pretend. She stood in the living room staring at nothing. "Ryan might step down temporarily," she said quietly. "Temporarily?" I echoed. "Until everything settles." "And will it?" She looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something crack in her composure. I don't know. That was the moment she began understanding. Her rapid ascent, the travel, the visibility, the exclusive strategy dinners, had been tied directly to him. His backing, his sponsorship. Without him, she was exposed. The following week, it became official. Ryan Cole was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. No admission. No scandal headline. Just leave. Corporate language for falling without noise. Brianna came home early that day. She walked in slowly, like someone entering a house that no longer felt secure. They're auditing everyone in his reporting chain, she said. Standard procedure, I replied. They're reviewing expense accounts, travel logs, communications. I held her gaze. Are you worried? Her silence was answer enough. What she didn't know was that the chain reaction looked clean from the outside. No revenge trail. No emotional fingerprints. Just financial recalibration followed by governance oversight. Consequences, not chaos. Over the next few days, invitations stopped. Dinners canceled. Travel postponed. Colleagues who once hovered around her suddenly found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. Professional circles adore momentum. They avoid instability. The isolation hit her harder than the investigation. People are distancing themselves, she said one night, pacing. That's what risk mitigation looks like, I said calmly. She stopped pacing. You sound like you've seen this before. I've seen how quickly rooms empty when power shifts. Her eyes searched my face. For what? I don't know. Perhaps for panic. Perhaps for anger. But she found neither. Because I wasn't operating from emotion anymore. I was operating from clarity. And clarity is quiet. By the end of that month, Ryan's resignation was announced. Personal reasons. Brianna read the statement 3 times before lowering her phone. They're making him the scapegoat, she said bitterly. I tilted my head slightly. Or maybe they're making him accountable. She didn't respond. But she knew. Her unshakable position had been built on proximity to a man who just lost everything. And she was still standing inside the blast radius. Not because I destroyed it, but because I stopped holding it up. When Ryan fell, Brianna didn't collapse. She shrank. The invitations stopped. The travel paused. The inner circle evaporated overnight. People who once laughed a little too loudly at her jokes suddenly avoided eye contact in meetings. At home, the shift was even colder. I stopped financing the extras. No spontaneous weekend trips. No luxury upgrades. I separated accounts quietly, legally. I wasn't punishing her. I was withdrawing from a life where I had been background support for someone else's ambition. She noticed. Things feel different, she said one night. They are, I replied. For the first time, she looked unsure of where she stood. Professionally, socially, financially. And I watched the realization settle in. My silence had never been weakness. It had been restraint. When she finally tried to explain about pressure, complexity, timing, I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The betrayal didn't start in a hotel, I told her calmly. It started the night you let him humiliate me in public. She cried. Promised clarity. Promised distance from the past. But I was already gone emotionally. I didn't destroy her life. I simply stepped out of it and took my support with me. For years, I chose love over pride. This time, I chose dignity. And the truth surprised me. Revenge didn't taste bitter. Tasted like freedom.